feel like I ran everybody off from last week. Y'all good? All right. I promise you this is going to be a good one. 1 Corinthians 13, one of the favorite chapters in the Bible. Even people that don't like Paul like this chapter. So, believe it or not, there are some people that don't like Paul. I'm so sorry. I did it again. I'm sorry. All right, so let me ask this question. I know some of you seasoned drivers. Have you ever driven somewhere and you just started going that way, and then finally you told somebody, hey, I go over to so-and-so, and I go this way over there, it's really easy, and they go, why do you go that way? Right? There's a better way to go, right? So they tell you a much better way. You know, it used to be, before our phones or GPS, we did everything with a map, right? And then remember they came out with MapQuest. Oh man, we were, as the expression goes, uptown, right? But now you don't even think about it. You just put it in your phone. The phone will take you to drive, step by step, walk you through it. Some of you might have like a Google Assist on your car, and you can just hit that and say, hey, this is where I want to go, and it pulls it right up. And so there's a lot of different things that folks have today. This message title is called The More Excellent Way. I get that right out of the text because that's what Paul talks about. Really, it's one of the most frequently cited chapters in all the Bible. I mean, it's read a lot. Hey, y'all come on in. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. Shelly's that person that comes in late and goes to the front row.
I do.
So, I'm glad y'all are here. I really am. 1 Corinthians 13 is where we are. But this is an interesting chapter because Paul starts out with spiritual gifts in chapter 12. Then he talks about a more excellent way in 13. He talks about love. Then he goes back to spiritual gifts in chapter 14. So the question is, why? Why would you write something like this and break your chain of thought? And then, remember, in 1 Corinthians 12, he said, all these gifts have a purpose. They're all important. They all matter. But there's a more excellent way. So, remember, the context is Corinth was a messed up place. All right? This church was dysfunctional in every way there was to be. They had things out of whack completely. I mean, if you're getting drunk at the Lord's Supper, there's something wrong going on. You know what I mean? So they're having this love feast. They're rich people are coming early. They're eating all the food. The folks that are working all day show up and they can't even get a scrap. And now he gets into gifts, and they got the gift side over. They want the gifts to bring attention to themselves, and that's the problem. They're being selfish with everything. So Paul says, you can have all that, but if you don't have love, none of it matters. If we're not doing this in love, then why are we doing it? Is the whole idea of what he's saying here. He says, works of love, which is a more excellent way. And he talks about these greater gifts. So we see this really, what he's trying to do is really cure a sickness. He's not trying to tell them that what they're doing is out of order as far as their culture, because their culture was out of whack. But he's telling them here that what you're doing is wrong because it's not having the right motivation. Let me kind of like Brenda say, hey, would you go get me something out of the fridge? And I go, ugh. Right? And she's done it 400 times for me. Well, that's an understatement. She's done it 4 million times for me. Right? And I go, ugh, really? I got to bring you back? So I don't know if your husband ever does that, but I do it every time she asks me something. No. I just like keep her on her toes. But it'd be like that. Why are you doing this? So really the motivation, how we do everything, should be out of love. So let's pick up. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13. We'll go down to verse 7. Come on, Dad. We'll go down to verse 7. I'm not going to pick on him. He's a policeman. He can give you a ticket. He scared me one day going behind me, so I'm not going to mess with him. All right, 1 Corinthians 13, start verse 1. It says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have but sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long, it is kind, love does not envy, love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not speak its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So think about it again. Paul wedges this chapter in between gifts of chapter 12, and then he does love in 13, and then again gifts in chapter 14. When we look at chapter 14 specifically, it has to do with tongues and prophecy. And you got to remember, the church of Corinth had all of this out of whack. They did. He goes on to explain tongues, he goes on to explain prophecy, and he even gets to the end, he talks about how women were really out of order in the church, and I know that's not a, popular topic today to talk about women preachers, but it is out of order and against Scripture. Quote John MacArthur, if you're in a church that has a woman as a pastor, you're in a church that doesn't believe the Bible. So it's not a knock on women, it's that God does everything decently and in order. And there's an order of things. So when he talks about love, the same thing is true. There's an order here. So there's a problem. He says, gifts without love. Robertson calls this sounding brass in verse 1 was literally echoing brass. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a child that decided they wanted to play the drums. And you went and bought them a drum set. We did. Noah was going to play the drums, and he practiced. And Noah was the kind you had to make them practice. You know, Eli and Nathan, they loved practicing their guitars. Noah, you had to, you're going to go up there and practice those drums. And then he started practicing. And then we're like, you're going to go up there and stop practicing them drums? Because, after a lot of kicks on that bass and the cymbals clanging and, trying to get timing down on one thing, and after a while, it's just like the same. You know how people start learning how to play an instrument. They play this part, oh, they messed it up. They start again. They play this part, oh, they messed it up. So after a while of that, you kind of get tired of it. But the reality here is he's saying this is just a noisy mess without love. Can you imagine trying to have some meaningful conversation with somebody, and they start taking all the pots and pans out of your cabinets, and they just break out the wooden spoons and start playing? You imagine what that would be like. You'd probably tell your kid, what? I'm going to kill you as soon as they get off the phone. No. You're going to get a whooping. What are you doing, right? Today we were talking. Vicky was on the phone trying to talk to somebody, and she wanted me to hear what the guy was saying. And I get the phone, so I start talking to him, and the fire alarm goes off in the school. Somebody comes up to me, is this a drill? I said, I have no idea, but I'm not leaving. I don't smell smoke, so I'm right here. They did a new pool station in the nursery, so they had to go down the other end because they're doing a baby room now, and they did the pool station practice, but everybody forgot to text Pastor Rodney about the about the fire drill about to go off. So we're on the phone trying to do something, and all of a sudden, I said, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm just going to have to wrap this up. There's a fire alarm going off. I think it's a drill, but who knows? Maybe the building's burning down. You can't focus. And when you have a lot of other noise going on, it's just noise. And before you know it, that's exactly what using a spiritual gift without love is just noise. It doesn't much matter if there's not love involved. The Corinthians were proud of their ability to speak in tongues, but Paul says you're just making noise. Without love, a person may have every other gift and may be able to use these gifts. But if they don't have love, it's nothing more than a clanging cymbal. I think the same is true when you talk about speak the truth in love. If I don't do this in love, I can tell the truth, but people aren't going to hear it the way it's meant to hear. They're just going to hear clang. So it has to be, everything has to be in love. He says, even if you prophesy, understand all mysteries, have the faith to remove mountains. Giving, sacrifice, it profits nothing without love. So there's a solution here. Paul really shifts gears after really towards 2 and 3, and he says we need to understand what kind of love we're talking about. So let's kind of get to it. He says, and though I have the gift, verse 2 and verse 3, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and I give my body to be burned, but have not love. So what's that word love? Agape, right? If I don't have agape love, it's meaningless. You know, when you think about love, the ancient Greeks had 4 different kinds of love. They had eros love, which is erotic love. They had storge, which is like a family love. They had philia or Philadelphia, which is brotherly love. And then they had agape love. Agape love is unconditional. You love people even on their bad days. Right? Even when they don't respond rightly, even when they don't show you love back, you love people with agape love, because that's the love that the Christian is supposed to have. It's a self-giving love. It means without demanding or expecting any kind of repayment. Piece of cake? Kind of hard, isn't it? Right? It's easy to have Philadelphia love, have brotherly love. Everybody's nice, kumbaya, everything's good. It's another thing to have a passionate love for our partner. It's another thing to have family love and love our family, but it's quite different to have agape love and love people who don't even love us back, because that's when we're most like Jesus. It's difficult. It really is. A New Testament definition of agape is a caring, self-sacrificing commitment which shows itself in seeking the highest good of the one loved. All right? You love your spouse. Amen? Yeah, that's good. 4 of us. So for a higher number, but marriage counseling right after the service. You love your spouse, amen? Amen? All right, thank you. All right, and you want to see the highest good for them, right? So it's not a selfish love. You want the highest good. One of the questions I do, would you rather questions I do with the kids, is it really gets them thinking, and they all answer the way I used to answer. Would you rather die before your spouse or after your spouse? You already got a plan? Okay. It's like the Notebook kind of thing, right? You're going to die the same night. Oh, okay. I got you. Bill's going to be free? No. I'm sorry. So what do you think 18 to 20-year-old kids say? Would you rather die before your spouse or after your spouse? They all say what? Before. They want to be the first ones going because they think their spouse would then be afterwards. I say, I used to feel that way. I did. I want to go first because, I don't want to be sad. Right? But the older I get, the more I think, I don't want Brenda to be by herself. I don't want her to feel that way. That sounds very self-sacrificing, but I can tell you, God's changed that in my heart because I was never that way before. But it's a tough call, and, chances are, if the Lord tarries, we're all going to face something like that. But the reality is, this kind of love wants the highest good. So what's the highest good for our spouse? Heaven. Right? We want not just what's best for them in life, we want what's best for them in death. When we sit there, if some preacher's preaching a funeral and the preacher goes, they're now in a better place, they're not in a better place, they're in the best place. I mean, we can go to a great retirement village, but I'm telling you, the best place to be is glory. So when we think of that, this sacrificial love is not just in life, but also in death. It's really an ongoing agape kind of love that wants the best for our spouse. Here's what's beautiful about this. You can take this love, matter of fact, agape love, let's just kind of look at it. Put the name of Jesus. We can easily say, Jesus suffers long, right? Jesus never fails. Jesus does not envy. You can go through these verses and just put Jesus in and see it over and over and over again, and that's the kind of love we ought to have. So because Jesus doesn't envy, we're not supposed to envy. Because Jesus is kind, we're supposed to be kind. So what does this love look like? Well, let's go through it, verses 4 through 7. There's actually 15. I'm not going to do it because of time tonight. But let me walk through it. Love suffers long. That word is long-tempered. Okay? You can take the same thing in Fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5, and look at patience, and it says long-suffering. Right? Does patience sometimes feel like long-suffering? Right? The King James actually uses the word long-suffering instead of patience. So it's kind of interesting to look at it that way. It comes from two words actually meaning long-tempered. And if you're patient, you're slow to anger. And don't we say that about people? He is such a patient guy. Right? This guy, he doesn't blow his top. He's easygoing. Right? And we could probably name names. And really it means you endure personal wrongs without feeling like retaliating. Wow. I mean, sometimes there's a feeling of retaliating. At least it's a feeling that comes up. So it's suffering long. Love is kind. It means gentle in behavior. It also means actively seeking to bless other people. Isn't that something? You ever think of this? How can I be a blessing to them? How can I bless them? We think of it sometimes when people go through a difficult time, but we don't think of it like every day when even though something's good, how could I be a blessing? How could I be an encouragement to that person? Love is kind. Love does not envy. It really means bad sense to boil. It doesn't boil with jealousy. Right? What do people envy? They envy somebody's car or house or things. But then he uses the next one. Love does not parade itself. Anybody got a different word for parade? After love does not envy, love does not parade itself. What do you got? Boast? Yeah, what else? Vaunt? Yep. It's an interesting word. It really means playing the braggart. Love does not brag. Right? It's kind of like saying, look what I got. You know, if jealousy is we're jealous of what we don't have, a braggart wants everybody else to feel jealous of what they have. You know, they want that. Somebody said it this way, bragging is trying to make others jealous of what we have. Jealousy puts others down. Bragging builds us up. So it's not just putting somebody down in jealousy, but it's bragging and building ourselves up. Look at the end of verse 4, though. He says it's not puffed up. I like that word. To puff up, it's kind of a word picture of bellows, you know, and you're getting ready. I remember we had these little bitty ones, and we had this fireplace that we had to, you know, get the fire going. And somebody had left that in the house we bought. They left these little bellows. And I remember, when I think about that, you could really say it this way. Love is not full of hot air. Right? We're not full of ourselves, is what he's saying here. But the list goes on. Love doesn't behave rudely, does not seek its own way, it's not easily provoked, doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Easy to do? You're on my list, right? You just moved up 3 notches, right? I mean, it'd be like me saying to Brenda, you know, you did the same thing last week, or you did the same thing 4 years ago. It's bad when people bring up the past over and over and over again. That's really only something the devil does. So when we do it, we're really, you know, what Paul said, forgetting those things which are behind, I press on, right? Because if we don't forget the things which are behind, what we'll remember typically is the bad and not the good. We'll focus on the negative because we've got failures in our past. One of my would you rather questions is, would you rather die 30 years from now with no regrets or live to be 110 years old with regrets? Kids say 30 years from now with no regrets. Isn't that something? We'd all like to die with no regrets, but the realism is we all have regrets, right? We all have things that we wish wouldn't have happened or wish we didn't do. And it doesn't celebrate when others fail, but rejoices in truth. I saw this thing, a saying, I thought I put it in here, but I saw a saying, be curious, not judgmental. I like that. When you deal with people, be curious. You know, those songs, walk a mile in their shoes. Be curious, not judgmental. Does not celebrate when others fail, but rejoices in truth. And then he gives 4 alls here. Do you see it? He says, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Wow, that's pretty powerful. So there's a test, a challenging exercise. I would encourage you. I heard someone give this one time. Really, it's a mark of spiritual maturity. But start in verse 4 and just put your name in every place it says love. Rodney suffers long and is kind. Rodney does not envy. Right? Rodney does not parade itself. Rodney is not puffed up. You just put your name in there. Chances are we'll get to 1 or 2 of them and go, Rodney does do that. You'll probably say, I think Rodney doesn't do any of those things. But you really get to that and you see, there's things that I struggle with and things that we deal with. But it might sound ridiculous, but it's a pretty good exercise if you think about it. Rodney does not behave rudely. Rodney does not seek its own. Rodney is not provoked. Thinks no evil. I mean, just some powerful, powerful verses here that really is a test for us. But look at the permanence. So I want you to pick up verse 8. We'll just go down to verse 13. Love never fails. He wraps that up at the beginning of verse 8. Really should be at the end of 7. And then he says, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as also am known. I also am known. And now abides faith, hope, and love, these 3, but the greatest of these is love. So he concludes really with spiritual gifts. He really talks about spiritual gifts are temporary, but love is eternal. And I use this a lot, but I think it's the greatest test. When you go to a funeral, you can tell the impact a person has made on other people. Now, I'm not saying, somebody could live in a community all their life and they can move to another community and not know some people. But if that person has been in that community a while, you can tell the impact somebody's made. You really can. And I think it's a sad thing when you go to a funeral and you can tell that person, he was an idol, if you will. He didn't really impact anybody else. He didn't really encourage anybody else. He didn't really love too many people. So it's a great picture here of reminding us that love is eternal. Love goes on. Love is the legacy, if you think about it. Right? I mean, my boys aren't going to sit there and say, boy, I'm sure glad Dad taught us how to build a wall. Right? They're going to say, I'm sure glad Dad loved us. I'm sure glad Dad cared about us. Eli Nathan and Noah gave me a little card. You can see their personalities and how they signed it, which is pretty cool. But it was like, Dad, you're out of this world, and you've made your little corner of it better. And I thought, well, that's a pretty cool Father's Day card. And then Eli said some really nice things in there. Nathan said some really nice things. And Noah said, no. Right? I don't know if he felt like the tag on the end or he was tired or what, but it was just, just plain Noah. But you see their personalities in that, and aren't they really are different, aren't they? And when you talk to them, Eli will be, chatty Cathy when he gets on the phone. Him and Ruthie get on their FaceTime. Nathan, I gotta so how you doing? I'm doing good. Well, what you got going on? Oh, not much. Right? And Noah's like, can I talk to Mom? So, you just kind of, you work with that. But it's interesting to see how people are different. And he shows us here that really we should emphasize love more than gifts, because the gifts are temporary, really containers, gifts are, of God's work in us. But love is the work itself. What we're doing is love. I mean, you want to know what the community needs to see out of the church? They need to see that the church loves them. If you want to know what the brother or sister that walks into the church, I'm always encouraged when people, I meet them after church, and they say, man, I had a lot of folks come over and introduce themselves. That means a lot to people. It really does. And I don't think we think about it often enough, but when we notice folks and we go over there and say hi and show them a smiling, friendly face, it really matters. It's the work that we do. Prophecies will cease, he says. Tongues will end. Knowledge will vanish, but love never fails. Love never fails. He wants to make that point. It literally means love never falls down or love never falls out. When I was putting this together, I was thinking of that phrase, love never falls out. You ever talk to somebody that are having problems or they're about to get divorced and you hear one of them say, we just fell out of love? You know? It's sad to hear that the love had almost a time limit. But you know the reality. Things happened and they really probably still do love each other. But all that stress and struggle in marriage sometimes gets them to feel that way. But this love, this agape love, this unconditional love, it never falls out. It never ends. You use really the analogy of childhood. You see how Paul explains this. When we were children, I used to think, I used to understand. He says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. But he really kind of gets us to when we mature, we must put away childish things. You know, you probably had that conversation with your child as they got older. You know, it's time for you to grow up. It's time for you to, you know, and the ultimate thing really as a parent, really the ultimate thing as a parent is you get them right to that point where their next step, they get it, right? I mean, they may still need some help or they may still need mom and dad, but you get them to the point where they're ready to stand on their own 2 feet. And there's nothing better than that, to get them to that point. And right now, he says we see in a mirror. I was looking at this and I thought, oh, I don't really, you know, what does that mean? So as I was looking at it, one commentary said, you need to understand that mirrors in those days were not glass. They were polished metal. And I had read that, but I'd never, until I asked the question to myself, what does that mean? Started researching it and actually found it. Chuck already knew that. I didn't know that. So as I looked at it, it's a polished metal. You ever get something so shiny you can see your reflection in it? Does it last? No, it usually gets dim, but the reality is it's still a dim reflection of you. It doesn't matter how shiny the metal is. You can look at it, and there's a big difference between looking at that and looking in a mirror. And what he's telling us is we want to get to the point where we look real and we look like Jesus is the idea here. He's saying it, someday we're going to see him face to face, but also someday we're going to see each other in the real light. We're gonna look differently to each other when we get to glory. And I'm not just talking about the glorified body. I'm saying that's the real us. Here we got the world and the stuff and the junk that weighs us down. But when we get there, you know, it's kind of like when, you know, Jesus is greater than our heart. He knows all things. Jesus sees the real us. We don't see that. We don't see that oftentimes when we look in the mirror at ourselves. But the reality is one day, when we get to glory, we're going to see ourselves and see each other in the right light. Paul gives his famous ending, these three abide, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. I think love is necessary to have faith and hope. I don't think you have faith without love for God. I don't think you can have hope without knowing that God's on the throne and love him and know that that's our great destiny. So I do think love is a key. I mean, obviously, Paul's a whole lot smarter than Rodney. But I do think love is a key here. These three do remain, but the greatest is love. And he calls this in chapter 12 a more excellent way. It's not just pretty things we say at weddings. I probably say this, I think, honestly, very few weddings I've done have I not said anything about 1 Corinthians 13. I mean it. It was probably only because somebody had written it and wanted something else. But most of the time, if I do a wedding, I say love is patient, love is kind. I go through there. And we talk about that even in premarital counseling, what that means. I think something pretty cool in premarital counseling that I do, and you get different reactions. Sometimes you can tell they talk. Again, I'm thinking about would you rather. So I ask a question to 20-year-old kids, and I say, would you rather have one child every year for 7 years, or are no children. What do you think they say? No children. Right off the bat. And I said, well, 1 for 4 years, no children. So then I said, well, how many kids is enough? You know, how many kids would you want? Did you ever get asked that before you got married? How many kids you want? Huh? What would you have said knowing what you know now? Huh? Dad would have said 2 and ended with me, or ended with my sister. How many would you have said? Go, Miss Jeannie. Right? Would you have said 4? You would have? How about that? Look at you. Right on the number. 4 is a good number. You know, maybe most people would have said what? 2, right? 2's enough. That's it. I'm done. Right? But when you ask him premarital counselor sometime and you say, well, how many kids? And you look at one of them and they go 4, and the other one goes, what? Right? It's so funny to see. Obviously, they haven't talked about it as premarital counselor. But it's a good way of bringing this up. It's not just poetry at weddings. This is really God's blueprint for love. Love has to be this way if it's really love. It has to be patient and kind. It has to have all these things in order for it really to be agape love. If it's not one of these things, then it's not agape love. It's I'll love you as long as you show me love. I'll love you as long as. And that's a different kind of love, which is really the world's love. Lost people can't have agape love. You understand what I'm saying? It only comes from God. So the best they have is Eros in Philadelphia. And love for family. They have storge, that Greek word. But that's it. They can't have this other one. So this is really God's blueprint. Alan Rippat said it this way, the great preacher. He said, the secret of every discord in Christian homes, communities, and churches is that we seek our own way and our own glory. We don't seek Him. We don't seek others. Elizabeth Elliot, bless her heart, a great woman of God, she said, the love described in 1 Corinthians 13 is not only a beautiful ideal, it is a possibility for those who belong to Christ. It's possible for us to love this way. You agree? It is, right? It really is. It's not easy, but it really is the way that Christians should love. We call this the love chapter, you know. And again, there's some people that don't really like Paul because they think he was do this or do that, which is kind of interesting to me. I mean, the greatest scholar we have in the Bible. But yet, everybody loves this chapter. They get this. They understand it. So it's interesting that he puts this here, again, in between these 2 chapters. And we're going to get to the end of 13 here in a little bit. I'm sorry, we're going to get into begin of 14 next week. And that's an interesting chapter. I actually taught it in Africa, where they were having a bunch of churches that were springing up that were having women's pastors. And they asked me when I got there, they didn't tell me what I was going to be teaching on. They said, you need to teach on women's pastors. No pressure when you find that out the night before you're going to speak to 50 pastors, right? And many of them were women. So I wasn't popular after that. But yet I told them the truth. I took them to 1 Corinthians 14. That word speak means with the authority of God. And he says at the end of that chapter, I suffered not a woman to speak, which means with the authority of God in the church, which means in a setting that's a worship service. So that wouldn't go over well to your Pentecostal sisters